Yeah. How you been doing?
Oh, I'm doing good, man. How you been?
Good.
No, I know you busy.
Yeah.
I know you busy.
Yes, indeed. So, now the real fun gonna begin now.
Yeah, I'm already getting stuff. Stuff's popping up out of nowhere. I'm like, how'd you even find me?
Yeah. Just double checking this presentation. Yeah, sorry, it took me a minute to get it to y'all. I was adding some stuff. Were you able to access the link I sent in the email?
I'm on it right now.
Okay. Let you check it out.
Well, I haven't forgot about you too. Oh, we're live right now. Okay.
No, we're not live yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. I haven't forgot about you, man. I'm still working on. I'm just trying to make sure it's right, because I know.
Oh no. We have a little time.
Yeah, little time. I'm on a hard right now though.
Uh,
I
yeah.
think I found something.
Let me see. Let me just send this back out. Link to join. Okay. We'll get started in about another minute.
All right. Stay out the way.
Yeah, actually, go live by default. All right. So, welcome everyone. We will be getting started momentarily. Still waiting on Zach and Dan should be joining us momentarily. Then we'll dive right into it. But while we do that, let me actually pull up my slides. Value packed session. Got a lot to talk about.
Definitely.
Indeed. All right, let me share screen. Entire screen. There we go. All right. Some people. Okay. I see Zach has joined. All right. Let's get started. I guess we can start off first with CMMC is final. I didn't think I would ever be saying those words. Should have had like a bullhorn, some confetti, something. Wow. So, what are y'all thoughts, Alex, Zach?
Yeah, just
Been at this for quite a while.
Yeah, I've been waiting for it, preparing, and it's here. So I'm ready.
It is here.
Are you ready?
We're gonna
That's
find out. Yeah, we're definitely gonna find out if I'm ready. But it's been a long time in the making. What's your reaction? Did you celebrate, Zach, or it's been a long? You've been following this for quite
um,
a long time.
yeah. No, I think a lot of people may have lost money today on bets that they placed a long time ago about saying that CMMC is
Yeah.
never going to happen. That the DoD would never actually do something that's going to be so expensive and damaging to small businesses. Well, happy Title 48 Day to those that celebrate. It is in fact real now. So now we need to figure out what the next steps are and how to advise people to cut through all the BS that I'm sure is being written
Ooh.
right now by the marketing
Yeah.
organizations to scare
Yeah.
them into getting certified tomorrow, and
Right.
uh, and go from there.
So marketing organizations are those exist out there?
I mean, they're great. We use one too, but as we've all seen, there's a lot of what to say misinformation out there
Yeah,
in the
absolutely.
space.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully we can help clarify some of that and let people know exactly what clear next step should be, and hope it doesn't bankrupt them. Okay, let's jump into it. So, for those who don't know me, I'm Darius Phillips, founder and president of Aspire Cyber. We specialize in CMMC readiness, and I'm also a lead CMMC certified assessor. To date, I've served on three assessment teams. Three assessment teams, and also we've had 3 clients actually go through the entire process and get CMMC level 2 certified. All right, you're up next, Alex.
All right, my name's Alex Omeke, founder of Secure Operating Solutions, lead CCA assessor. About 20 years working as a DoD contractor, so pretty familiar with a lot of this stuff on the cybersecurity side. Look forward to it. Thank you.
Awesome. Zach.
Hi, everyone. Zach Walker, co-founder ATX Defense, lead CCA, and also owner of C3PAO. Not a compliance guy, but I have about 2 decades of experience in cyber intel, cyber warfare with DoD and other agencies. Good to be here.
All right, you're up, Dan. Last but not least.
All right, thank you. I'm Dan Sterletti with Demes Technical Services. I'm a lead CCA and also a provisional instructor. I've been in the CMMC ecosystem since there was no CMMC ecosystem in the fall of 2019. I've done 7 JSVAs and 13 CMMC level 2 assessments this year. My company provides cybersecurity consulting services to get companies ready for CMMC. And then we work with other C3PAOs to provide assessments.
Awesome. So we have a wealth of experience that's going to be sharing their insights with you all today. So let's dive into it. Our agenda for today, we'll look at the cyber threat framework, your level, path to certification, rollout, and then leave you with some clear action items, top 5 recommendations that we have for you to get started. So I want to kick off, hand it over to Zach. So Zach, you haven't served in the military, 23 years, recently retired?
23.
23 years, and also during that time served at the CIA and NSA. Give us some insight into the cyber threat that defense contractors face and why this CMMC program was pretty much just not optional for DoD, why they had to do this.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I do think it's important to start with this for context because as the rule comes out and businesses realize that it's real and they all get wrapped around trying to make this happen and the insanely high costs that are likely to come with it for many organizations, unfortunately, it is important to know that we have this for a pretty good reason. My understanding is that it goes back in many ways to the 9/11 Commission report saying that we need to do a better job of marking information and sharing it, which of course led to the creation of the CUI program, and then the DFARS 7012 clause, and then this whole 6-year adventure that has been turning CMMC into a reality. And it is very real, right? I mean, there's a reason why a Chinese fighter plane is almost identical to an American fighter plane, not because they love the US Air Force, although maybe they do. I certainly do, having served in it. But most likely it was because it was really easy for China to steal plans and other information from the defense industrial base. I mean, we all know the stories, right? We know how from large to small organizations have been compromised just over and over again for the past couple of decades. I also had the misfortune of working the Edward Snowden compromise when I was at the Pentagon, and a similar kind of idea, right? The bad guys, they have this information that we have that's very sensitive, and they can certainly use it. I mean, I would say China is among the best in the world at being able to use information and leverage it. I mean, it's brilliant capabilities to use information against us. So yeah, what is the threat? Reducing warfighting capabilities, organizations that are providing either hardware or software, whatever that may be, to the Department of Defense. If that information is leaked, if vulnerabilities are identified, again, it's the opposite of the intelligence game that we play. We're constantly trying to get information about vulnerabilities in enemy systems, and so they're doing the same to us. And if it's easy to just hand it to them, by getting it from a DIB contractor, then we're in trouble. It will weaken our technological superiority, and it may not be very quick. It may not be something that is noticeable right away. But like I mentioned before, the Chinese fighter plane that looks just like the American fighter plane, not that they were able to build something similar to ours. I mean, that's fine. That's fair game. The fact that they can do this with spending a fraction of the R&D. I mean, what if we spend on F-35 like $1 trillion? If they can just walk in and take the plans? I mean, it's like cheating on your homework.
The return on investment for them.
Yeah, they're great ROI. I mean, that's pretty awesome. Someone's definitely meeting their KPIs, so hopefully get promoted. But it's just devastating for us in the much longer term. And it's not just the defense property. Certainly, if an organization does have their system that's that easy of being compromised, it's very likely that bad actors would take company proprietary information in addition to anything that is intellectual property that's being used for the government. Yeah, and then finally, just the compromise of national security information. You know, those of us that come from the classified world, I think, find it kind of funny how we treat CUI, because certainly as a Govy, you mishandle CUI like it's going out of business. Like I don't think I've ever met anyone in the government that's been had a slap on the wrist for egregiously mishandling CUI and blasting it out to thousands of people with private email addresses. But it's a different set of rules. I mean, it's different if you're not a Govy. It's a different situation. So if you are an organization that has been entrusted with national security information, even if it's not classified, even if it's just controlled unclassified information, I mean, it is the government has gone to the point of saying that this is sensitive information that needs to be protected. And even though they're not going to have any ramifications for mishandling it, unfortunately, the way our system works, you absolutely are. And certainly not to get to fear, because I hate that. But when you read about these False Claims Act stories that come up from DOJ, we're talking multi-million-dollar lawsuits because an organization is like, I don't want to follow 800-171. So it is real, unfortunately. There are definitely teeth attached. And again, I can't blame the government for doing that, because there are rules that companies said that they're following. And if they're not, there has to be consequences. But having lived on both sides of assessment and CMMC services, just getting to that point where an organization is fully compliant is no simple feat, as many of our listeners know.
Yeah, agreed. So thanks for level setting. I think it's, like I said, a good starting point to help people understand why, versus, okay, this is just some arbitrary cybersecurity compliance rule. No, there's a why behind it. And like you as a veteran, I do understand the importance to the national security that defense contractors play. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so next up, let's just take a look at the CMMC framework. I'll be handing it over to Alex. And Alex, from your perspective, not only as a lead CCA, but also as a federal contractor, kind of share some insights about the framework, starting off with just the type of information that's in scope.
Yeah, definitely. We'll just actually start off with the slides and we'll go from there. Of course, you have the FCI and the CUI. The FCI is going to be defined in the FAR 52-21. The 17 technical requirements via the 48 CFR. CUI is going to be in your 32 CFR. Now, when it comes down to the difference, it's a huge difference between level 1 and 2. Of course, level 1, everybody's going to have to do it anyway, just if you're handling contracts in general. And certain people are going to have to be ready for CUI, which I know you guys are ready for. And I guess we can go to the next one.
And before we do that, as far what are some examples of that, like federal contract information or controlled unclassified information? I know it's a gray area for a lot of defense contractors.
Yeah, so as far as federal contract information, it's going to be, just getting a contract in general. So you're definitely going to have that just from even, playing around with it. You're already handling FCI. CUI is going to just depend on if it's confidential information that should be protected pretty much. And you will see that inside a contract as well, letting you know what type of CUI you're handling. There's different levels to it. Some may be CTI, nuclear propulsion. There's just different levels to it. So you definitely want to check your contract to see which type you have. And usually the more sensitive it is, you're going to probably require a level 2 assessment. Now, and with that, a lot of contracts have CTI in it too, which is documentation, schematics, blueprints,
Yeah,
things like that. So
CNC code.
Exactly. So just don't be surprised. And even COTS, a lot of people think they can get away with COTS, commercial off-the-shelf resale, and it won't be applicable. But once you start making any changes to that information, like if the government orders something, you have to like tweak it to that particular installation or whatnot. It's may fall into the whole CUI range, so you have to be careful with that as well. Just put it out there. Yeah.
Great. So Dan and Zach, you have any other examples you want to add for FCI or CUI to help people kind of understand?
Well, we use the term CTI. Some people may not know what that is. That's controlled technical information. The example I've given in some of my training is maybe you're a boot manufacturer, and you've just gotten a RFQ for 500,000 pairs of boots, and they're supposed to be white, not tan or other camouflage colors. That could border on going into CUI because of the fact that could discuss what the mission is for why you need those kinds of boots. So that's why commercial off-the-shelf stuff like boots might actually be CUI in that case. But CUI, it could be anything from aircraft parts to guns and munitions or anything like that.
Yeah. Do you want to add, Zach, for examples?
Yeah, I'll just add maybe a counter example, but we've talked to dozens of companies that don't have any CUI or FCI. They just want an SBIR, or they're on a contract with a prime, or want to get on a subcontract with the prime, and they will probably never touch CUI. Yet it's in the contract. Now they have to have a system that is fully capable of meeting all NIST standard 71 controls, even though they're never going to use it. And unfortunately, it does not change. If you are never going to touch CUI and you've got the contract requirement, you're part of the game.
Yeah.
But it is a business differentiator. And so you're also now on the list with that prime, which means that prime could tap you from other things.
That's a good point.
So it's a growth opportunity as well.
Yeah, really good point. All right. All right, you're back up, Alex.
All right, CMC, we'll start with the what. A consistent pre-award assessment methodology to determine whether a prospective contractor has implemented cybersecurity protections necessary to adequately safeguard DoD information. That's what it is. Now, why? To increase the cybersecurity posture of the DIB and better protect sensitive, unclassified information. All have to protect each other here. And how? All defense contractors and subcontractors will show compliance with applicable security requirements through self-assessment or independent assessment prior to contract award, excluding the commercial off-the-shelf procurements.
Yep. Absolutely. And just to emphasize that pre-award, so essentially if that DoD solicitation, now that the Title 48 CFR is final, goes into effect November 10th, so 60 days from today. Once that contractor bids on, or just company bids on that solicitation that has CMMC requirement in it, let's say it has CMMC level 2, they can't be awarded that contract, especially if it's a certification assessment, until they have that certification on file. And I've seen that happen with a client we have. They contacted us a few months ago after they were denied a contract because they didn't have their 800-171 self-assessment in SPURS. So this was a $5 million contract. And needless to say that lady, she was really upset because she didn't even know what the self-assessment was. And the reason she didn't get awarded the contract because she didn't have that on file. And so with CMMC, you're either going to have that self-assessment for level 1 or level 2 on file, or if you have to have that certification assessment. Anything else y'all want to add to that as far as the pre-award requirement?
I mean, you make a great point. Just make sure if you're doing any type of a self-assessment, you want to make sure that information is correct. Because I have a feeling now there's be a lot more scrutiny on that type of information as well. So you got to be prepared.
And
So-
to that point, I'm sorry, Dan, you about to say something?
I was going to say something. A lot of times we tend to think from reading all of our 48 CFR, 32 CFR documents that we're all dealing with Department of Defense directly. Department of Defense awards some primes. Primes awards the subs. There's a lot of primes now that are already pushing out. Look, you have to have this, and we don't care what the rollout is. You're going to have to have CMMC level 2 certification.
Right.
And so that's an area that I want to get people to realize. Talk to your higher tier sub if you're not prime. Make sure you understand what they want. The Lockheeds and the Boeings and stuff like that, they're already on their blogs pushing out what people need.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've seen one of those memos from Lockheed that was pretty much asking their vendors, what's your CMMC status? We'll talk more about that later. But Zach, from the standpoint of a CMMC third-party assessment organization, can you talk to us about once a company successfully passes their CMMC level 2 certification, like what happens and how does that information get to Spurs?
Absolutely, yeah. So you start the assessment process. There's a time before the actual formal assessment called phase 1, where we verify that yes, you actually have a system security plan and that you are eligible for an assessment. It's a really, I've said it before, it's a really interesting balance because C3PAOs can't offer advice, they can't consult. That's considered a conflict of interest. But we are directed to look at an SSP, and if it's not going to pass and there's no chance, just respectfully decline the assessment, right? So it's this interesting balancing act of and I think that's great, of just making sure that you're not setting these organizations up for failure. So that's phase 1. Once that's done, you go through the formal assessment process. At the end of that is the assessment results briefing, and so that's inclusive of this 10-day reevaluation period and everything else. Once there's a final set of determinations made, then you've got the assessment results briefing, and that's when typically an organization will be told, they will have to be told if they pass or didn't pass the assessment, what controls or objectives they missed, if they're POEMable, if they're not POEMable, and then where they go from there. But assuming that a client or an OC made it through, perfect score, no issues whatsoever, once the assessment is done, there's a system called EMAS, which I'm not really sure what it stands for, but it's definitely where dreams go to die. It's very hard to use, and sometimes it just doesn't work at all, but it's fine. It's a DoD system, so it doesn't have to meet any kind of availability requirements. We upload all the results. There's a big spreadsheet. We upload a certificate of CMMC status. We upload the assessment results briefing, and then eventually get to the end, and we get some information that we can share back with the client. We can share a certificate. We can tell them that they're CMMC certified, and it'll typically say, like, let's say a client got their assessment results brief today. We put it in to EMAS. Typically, it'll say your CMMC certification date is September 10th, and it'll expire September 9th, 2028. So 3 years minus a day. And then from there, and this is actually pretty nifty when it works, EMAS will actually reach back to the supplier performance risk system and update that, which is why it's so important for CAGE codes to be correct on assessments, because that's how it works. It'll go back and update that CAGE code, showing a successful assessment. So user will need to log in, affirm that they have received that assessment, and then once they do that, they're marked as a successful CMMC assessment and good for 3 years. So it's really DoD has made it, for the most part, a relatively seamless process whenever all the systems work. But I think of note, as far as I know, there is no way for anyone that is not the Department of Defense to look in Spurs and see what your score is. And I think that's why, even before the Title 48 rule, especially primes, were saying you've got to get certified, you've got to know, because if you send your certificate of status to a prime, then they know you're certified. But if you don't have that certificate, there's really no way for them to know, or anyone to know if you meet that status. And so I think that's part of the reason behind the push to get certifications, even though they may not be required for another year or 2 months.
Good, great insights. Mike Parsons, you had a question?
Yeah, it's it's actually on the point that Zach was just talking about. I've heard on more than one occasion that the arrangement that a contractor has with their prime is a business arrangement, and so the prime can ask them to do just pretty much anything they want, within reason, of course.
Right.
But the contractor can't push back and say, "Oh no, I'm going to be level 1. I don't need to be level 2," and go through that expense. And they're going to say, "Okay, fine. You're not on the team anymore.
Exactly.
You're gone."
Right.
Exactly.
So,
like Dan mentioned, a differentiator.
Yeah, and they're out there actively polling all their subs to make sure that they've got their team together, because when the shoe hits, they're going to be ready to roll.
Right. Yeah. Mitigate their risks. Absolutely. All right. So we kind of touched on a lot of these already. But on this one, just want to highlight the subcontractor, the flow down requirements, and 48 CFR rule talked about that as far as how it's up to that prime. They're responsible for verifying that their subs have the appropriate CMMC level for that contract. And then if you're a sub and you have other suppliers that you're sharing FCI or CUI with, you have that responsibility of verifying their CMMC status. Let's see. So going on to the next one, just quickly highlight some of the existing requirements for DFARS. We have that DFAR 7012. So really it all maps back to this DFAR 7012, which has been in effect since 2017, and which imposes a requirement for defense contractors to fully implement 80171 at a minimum. But prior to the CMMC rule going into effect, it's been a self-attestation. That CMMC is shifting from that trust then verify to verify first, then trust. So that's a big shift.
Mm-hmm.
DFAR 7019, that's the requirement to submit that self-attestation in SPURS, been in effect since 2020. And then DFAR 7020, that's what gives the DoD DIPCAC, their assessors, the right to perform assessments. So they can just call up a defense contractor and say, hey, we're going to be there on site in 2 weeks to perform 80171 assessment. So all of these are existing requirements. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the new clause for CMMC is going to be 7021. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, the new clause effective November 10th, 2025 will be that 7021. So that's what's imposing. We're authorizing the DoD contracting officers to enforce CMMC in those solicitations. Anything else you want to add? Any questions about that? I miss anything?
Just say that 70-20, yeah, that's pretty serious. So you want to take that one very serious, where they can just show up, signing off on that one. So that's all I have to say.
Yep, absolutely. And I know some organizations who have been through those assessments with the DIPCAC, so the Defense Industrial Base, the Cybersecurity Assessment Center. It's existing requirements. So it just highlights that CMMC is not in terms of the independent verification by the third party assessment organizations, the C3POs, that's going to be new. But in terms of what they're trying to verify compliance with, it goes back to December 2017 with the DFAR 7012. All right. I think this one's up for me as far as your CMMC level. We kind of touched on that earlier, but to go on a little more impact. So who's impacted? Those contractors, those primes, and then also the subcontractors. Those systems that are handling, process, storing, transmitting federal contract information or controlled unclassified information. FCI or CUI. It's going to apply to new DoD contracts, task orders, delivery orders. And then we mentioned COTS is exempt, the commercial off the shelf. With the caveat, once the commercial off-the-shelf items are being modified per the contract requirements, now that's no longer COTS. Now it's customized for the DoD. So now you're at a minimum dealing with FCI and potentially CUI. Important to understand that distinction. I know also in the 48 CFR rule, it mentioned what is it? It's called fundamental research for those higher education institutions. So you mentioned that is public information. It's not FCI or CUI until really that is triggered to where it can become FCI or CUI. So if they're starting to do custom research for the DoD, then now that's no longer fundamental research. So Inspire Cyber, we work with a lot of research universities, those R1 institutions. I know that fundamental research is a big area for them and concern as it relates to CMMC. But yeah, as long as it's not altered or customized to the DoD, then it may still fall into that bucket. But otherwise, it potentially is going to be FCI or CUI. All right, so that's going a little too fast, but here we go. So yeah, level 1, 15 requirements. So here, level 1, annual self-assessment. Those requirements are taken from FAR 21. And as Alex mentioned, that FAR applies to all federal contractors. But as of today, those other federal agencies are not requiring, to my knowledge, as far as a attestation annually, pretty much just by that federal contractor signing that contract and invoicing the federal government, they're essentially attesting to compliance with the FAR 21. But CMMC is going to require that annual self-assessment and affirmation from an affirming official who's responsible for CMMC compliance in that organization. Typically, it's going to be someone senior within that organization. But that's all federal contract information. In level 2, we're going to graduate 110 requirements, go from 15 to 110. Now you're likely handling that controlled unclassified information. At CUI, at that point, you're going to need a self-assessment, or it's going to be a actual certification assessment performed by a CPO every 3 years with an annual affirmation by that affirming official. Right now, CMMC maps to 80171 revision 2. There's a class deviation for that, but I think they're probably starting a rulemaking pretty soon, DoD, to map to revision 3. That's the current version 801. Last but not least, we have that level 3. If you're at that point where you're handling that sensitive, still CUI, but it's just going to be probably the most sensitive type level of CUI that DoD shares with contractors. Now you get a bonus 24 requirements, which are taken from 800-172. And then those assessments are only performed by the DIPCAC. So the DoD assessors every 3 years. The caveat with that is these levels are cumulative. So you have to achieve that level 2 certification before you can even reach out to DoD and say you're ready for the level 3. They're just going to be assessing those 24 additional requirements. All right, I'll pause there for a moment. Any questions? Anything you all want to add?
That's about right. I sent you a little slight message on the side too. You're on track.
Let's see.
It's in the chat.
I don't know if you mentioned it, but the level 3, the 24 requirements that aren't in level 2, you have to get CMMC certified first by C3PAO level 2, and then get DIPCAC to come out. And my understanding is they only look at the 24 requirements. They don't go back and adjudicate the other 110. So for those of us that, whenever we hear the idea of the DIPCAC assessment, we kind of get a little sense inside. They're only looking at 24 things. Also, I think maybe about a week or two ago, when the Golden Dome guidance came out, which again, $1 trillion opportunity, it, in using many words, essentially said that CMMC level 3 will be the requirement for Golden Dome. So at least that's the interpretation from a lot of folks in the community. So if you're interested in making money and keeping America safe from rockets, think about CMMC.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, Alex, yeah, I got your text. Is my audio better now? My mic, okay. Yeah, sometimes this plug becoming just a little bit. Appreciate it. Let's see. All right, moving on. So again, what level you're going to need, that's going to be in the DoD solicitation. And again, it ties back to this 48 CFR rule, which allows now, gives the contracting officers the authority to insert the CMMC into the solicitations for DoD. It must be met prior to award. So remember, you can bid on that solicitation that requires let's say a level 2. But if you don't have, if it requires a level 2 certification assessment, and by the time they're ready to award that contract, if your company doesn't have that level 2 certification, then yeah, that's a problem. You're like, now it's going to go to your competitor because you're not qualified to receive that award. And then you can imagine, I think in the rule they mentioned that CMMC is going to ultimately impact over 300,000 companies. So you can imagine it's probably going to eventually be a backlog. Zach, today, do you know the number of C3POs that are authorized? I know it was like 70 last time I saw.
It was 81 last time I checked. I think we
Okay.
just added 2 on Friday. But it's
All right.
it's
Okay.
not a lot to do 80,000 assessments every 3 years. That's about 16,600 a year. That'd be a lot of work for 81 people, 81 teams.
Yeah. It's going to be tough. Let's see. I think David, do you have your hand up? You have any questions or comments?
Yeah, quick comment on. So at the conclusion of the assessment, the scores are uploaded by the assessment team, the C3PO, into EMAS, right? That's what I heard. And then EMAS has a back-end connection to SPURS. But then I heard, like, while that transition of information into SPURS is getting reconciled, like, I guess which entity generates the certificate indicating that they've passed CMMC level 2? Is that the C3PO in the event that, let's say, the CO is like, hey, how do I know that you've met this? And
Correct.
It's like, hey, it's already been uploaded. Well, I don't see it in SPURS, right, or EMAS. So is that on?
It's the certificate. It's a certificate. Yeah, there's a list. I think up to 3 people from a C3PAO can be authorized by CyberAV to sign
Okay.
the certificate of CMMC status digitally.
Okay.
And so then you'll receive a 1-page, 15 megabyte PDF. I haven't figured that one out yet, but that'll be your certificate of status.
Okay. So they have a workaround if for some reason there's a systemic issue between
Oh, no,
uploaded.
it's not a workaround. You do both. You actually have to upload the certificate into EMAS for
Okay.
record keeping. It really is. It's just meant to be your, I would say, public facing, but they also don't want people publicly sending out the certificates. I'm not actually sure what it is. I think it's maybe meant for people to send to their mom so they can be proud what their child has achieved. I don't know what the purpose is aside from just saying, yep, we're certified, and just having something
Okay.
tangible.
Okay.
Yeah, I visited a client site who got certified, and they had it in a frame on their wall. They're proud, understandably so. All right, so for these next couple slides, I'll just kind of go through these kind of quickly, just highlight the key takeaway for level 1. Remember those 15 requirements, annual self-assessment will be that most basic level of cybersecurity posture, federal contract information that you're handling. Level 2, CUI, 110 requirements. So it's either going to be a self-assessment or a third-party certification. And I know I've heard Stacy Bosjanik mention that wouldn't hold your breath for the third party. For the self-assessments once after the phase rollout, the vast majority of companies that are handling CUI that is found in, NARA, those categories, it's going to require that third party certification assessment. All right, someone had their hand raised.
That's me.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Oh.
Oh, go ahead, Dan. You want to ask something?
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to point out that level 2 builds on level 1. So the 15 that we're talking about in level 1 is incorporated into level 2. It's just the term FCI changes to CUI. So, in level 2, you're dealing with FCI and CUI, but it's the same 15 requirements.
Yeah, and I've seen organizations where they'll have all their CUI in enclave. So let's say like Google Workspace, and then maybe they're using the FCI is being stored locally, or vice versa. But you certainly can have two different scopes for that FCI and CUI. Because we know what for CUI, if you're using a cloud service, that cloud service has to be FedRAMP moderate, so that cloud service provider. But you don't have that requirement for FCI.
Right.
Level 3, remember you're getting those 24 bonus requirements. So to kind of address those advanced persistent threats. And then that's going to be DoD DIPCAC that performs those assessments only after you've gotten your level 2 certification assessment. So if you are bidding on a solicitation that requires a level 3, then you want to make sure you are get started, because you got to go through level 1, level 2, then level 3 cumulative. And key applications, we talked about SPURS, supplier performance risk system. Make sure your CMMC status is current. Recently had a client that they were bidding on a DoD solicitation that required that they produce evidence that they had already submitted their CMMC level 1 self-assessment in SPURS. So that was, and this was before the CMMC final rule was published. So you want to make sure that status is current. And then in CMMC UIDs, we're going to talk more about those. But that's going to be for each information system, annual affirmation, and then the flow down requirements to the subcontractors. Can't forget about those subcontractors. So with CMMC, it's an information centric framework. So wherever that information flows, that FCI, that CUI flows, then the requirements follow. It doesn't matter about if they're international. It doesn't matter if it's a small mom and pop subcontractor. It just doesn't matter. The DoD is concerned about the information. That's what they're used into determine what's in scope, what's out of scope in terms of those systems. All right, so I can take a break. You're up, Dan. Path to certification, assessment process. And I'll go to the first slide. If you can talk about those UIDs.
So the UID is a 10-character code, and it's assigned to each CMMC assessment, and it's linked to the specific information system in SPURS. Now, a lot of times, when we're doing assessments and creating an SSP, the system is not just your computer; it is the entire information system that we're talking about. And so there's this UID code that links the assessment to that system.
Yeah, I heard it recently. A good analogy for that one. They said, think of the UID like a license plate for your car. So each car there's a system, and certainly with when we say system, it's not just the IT; it's also the people. So the DoD considers people could be asking what they call them, the CUI assets or FCI assets, where they're handling that information. So that could be your people on your sales team, HR. So just factor that in. It's not just the computers.
Yeah, everything referenced in your system security plan is the system. And that UID references that.
Absolutely. And then a large organization may have multiple UIDs for various systems, maybe a map to different lines of businesses. And they may, if they're separate systems, then they may need separate certification assessments.
Right.
Zach, can you talk to from the C3PO perspective how you all handle that? I guess is this UID going to replace cage codes, or still going to be cage codes and these, or how are they going to work?
As far as I know, cage code is critical for you to have a SAM.gov account and bid on government information. I don't think that's going to change. That's why I mentioned earlier that the cage code is so critical to get correct. There's been a lot of discussion on the C3PAO calls about cage codes that were wrong, or they didn't mention a higher level organization cage code, or they realized that actually this other one should have been in the assessment scope and isn't, and how do we add it after the fact? And so just take the time to make sure that you're really thinking about, okay, every single cage code, every organization that is using this information system, make sure it is included in part of the assessment. In fact, there's actually like a multiple page addendum. I mean, you could theoretically have 50 cage codes in a single assessment if it was a larger organization. The UID, I'm not aware of UID being more than like what he mentioned, what that Dan mentioned is the unique identifier for an assessment, which I assume at some point primes are going to start asking for, or the government may ask for in responses. And so you'll need to know, because it does, it links it to that point in time for that specific information system.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so that'll be really good information to have. Now, can it be queryable outside of the Department of Defense? I'd be surprised if it could be, although that would be an interesting key if DoD were to ever make it something kind of publicly accessible to be able to confirm that organization. Like when you say, I've got CSSP, click on my Redley
Yeah.
and you can
Your
see that,
badge.
like same kind of thing. Like, here's my UID. It'd be cool if DoD had a system that could just like confirm that they're certified or not. But there's some ideas. Anyone out there listening from the Department of Defense? I'm sure it would only be about $60 million in 8 years to get that system in place.
But no, that's a good point. So yeah, it's the UID is not going to replace the cage code that's separate. This is really tied to the actual assessment that was performed. So whether it's that self-assessment or certification assessment, how the contracting officers are going to be able to track it within SPURS. Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the rule they mentioned, like when you're awarded a contract, that contracting officer is going to be required to look and see, okay, the system you're using for this contract, what's the CMMC status in terms of the assessment for that system? So, yeah, makes sense. Absolutely. Okay, next one. So this one I'll talk to real quick, Dan. This is just essentially how Aspire Cyber approaches our readiness engagement with clients. Because typically, like a client will come to us and they may already have started at just the number. We're doing an assessment, and I always take them back to doing the pre-assessment first. So at that point, where they're identifying their contractual clauses, their FCI, their CUI, and scope, certification, assessment boundaries, doing a network diagram, all of the groundwork, the foundation, versus if you're just jumping straight into an assessment, a gap assessment, you don't even know your boundaries. You haven't really clearly defined what's in scope, what's out of scope. So likely that gap assessment is not going to be accurate. And also should be doing a risk assessment too, doing that before doing that assessment, so you can see how you're going to address certain requirements per your organization needs and risk appetite. And once we've documented those deficiencies per the gap assessment, now we're focused on the remediation, implementing the requirements to make sure they're meeting the 800-171. And then documentation. And this one, at this point, we know, okay, we can start finalizing our documentation, system security plan, policies, procedures, so forth. And then that last phase where everyone's happy when they pass is that certification phase. Once they go through that certification assessment, prior to that, we'll do a mock assessment for our clients to make sure that they're ready for game day.
So one of the things I want to stress is a lot of times we say NIST 800-171. And that is the biggest disservice we've done to the organization seeking certification. We should always talk about NIST 800-171A, which is the assessment guide to NIST 800-171. I always think of 171 as basically the index of 171A. 171A breaks those 110 requirements or controls in this language into 320 objectives. And that is what an assessor evaluates you on. We do not evaluate on the 110 requirements. We evaluate you on 320 objectives. Your SSP that you create should be based on 320 things, not 110.
Right.
Even the email spreadsheet that we fill out as an assessor has 320 lines that we fill out. So when you're doing the pre-assessment, the gap assessment, remediation, and creating your documentation, that piece should be thinking about that. Then when you bring in between the documentation and certification, that's that whole assessment process. The assessment process oftentimes is a week-long, I call it the interview week, but it actually starts earlier because you have to do scoping with the OSC. You have to verify that they are ready, that all their documentation's there, their artifacts are there, all that type of stuff, so that during that week, you can have a productive week versus maybe finding them not met.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a good point. Really good point. And I prefer using the CMC assessment guides because it combines the AR-171 and the alpha, and
Yeah.
you can't overlook those assessment objectives. And that's another thing I discover oftentimes when clients have already done a gap assessment prior to contacting us is they've used the AR-171.
mhm.
If you forgot about those assessment objectives, then it's
Yes.
not going to be accurate. Because, for example, the 3.1.1, the first requirement for level 2, it has 6 corresponding assessment objectives to the requirement. So let's say you meet 5 of those 6, that requirement is not met because you didn't
Right.
meet all the assessment objectives. So, absolutely. Okay, let's go to
That-
next one.
Actually, if I could speak on that, that's kind of a pet peeve of mine. Is there's a lot of solutions out there. They're like, we'll get you 80% there, we'll get you 70% there, we'll get you 90% there, and what's the difference between an organization that has met 0 out of 320 objectives and one that's met 319 out of 320?
Nothing.
Actually, there's nothing. Yeah, they're the same. Neither of them are going to get a certificate of CMMC status. So I just want to make sure people know this is not an ATO for a federal organization where you can miss some stuff. You can miss things, but you still have to get reassessed. If anyone says that you can become CMMC certified with anything less than a 100% perfect answer to all the objectives, you should end the conversation right there because they're lying to you. And I
Right.
think, unfortunately, there's a lot of these partial solutions that intentionally don't do the hard parts that claim that they are a quick and easy answer, and you just have to have buyer beware. Ask your prospective vendor how many clients they've gotten CMMC certified, and if the answer is 0, then you know.
Yeah. So you have to do your due diligence.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So next up, we're going to, Dan, touch on POAMs real quick. So if a company's not ready,
Sure. So hopefully this happens during your mock assessment. You do a mock assessment, you find some deficiencies, and you create POAMs, which are the plan of action and milestones. It's essentially a list of the things that you need to do, how you're going to do them, and what is the milestone to achieve it. You need that done before you have the assessors show up for your assessment. Okay. Now, if the assessors assess you and there are some 1-point requirements that are not met, those can be put onto a POAM, and you would have 180 days to resolve those. Now, you have to have a score of 88 or above to be eligible for that, and they can only be the 1-pointers. And so basically, the 1-pointers are usually pretty easy to do, although sometimes they can trip you up. And so, if you get an 88 or above, we can go into the POAM route and give you a conditional certification until you get your POAMs cleared out. The way you do that is you call up your assessor and and they will do a delta assessment on the requirements that have POAMs. So it's not a horribly hard thing to do, but it just delays your actual real CMMC certification. And so everyone should go in with the plan of having a 110. Don't go in with the plan of using the assessors as your final consultant to let you know what gaps you have.
yeah, that could be expensive. So Ronnie, I see you put a question in the chat about how do you assess the scope if the company doesn't have any DoD contracts, they don't process FCI, CUI, and get certified, be ready to bid on future contracts. I know, Zach, you have experience with clients that's in that position. What are your thoughts with that?
So I've had that. So the 320 objectives, which is the 110 requirements, are really not based on any level of CUI. If you have CUI, no matter if it's basic or specified, you still have to meet all of them. So as an assessor, I'm assessing everything. Areas that I would be interested in is making sure that their like login banners and stuff do bring up CUI. If they, I'll ask them if, will you ever have ITAR or export control, things like that. And they're like, no, that is not in our business. Well, then, I'm interested in making sure that at least meeting all of the basics of language and training and stuff like that for their people. The scoping really is about what are CUI assets if you had CUI. So if you had CUI come into your company, what machines would they go on? And what's the speed? What are your security protection assets? The scoping guide. I highly recommend everybody go read the CMMC Level 2 scoping guide, and that will help you understand what the scope is in terms of the types of systems that you have, and then you decide if you're going to do an enclave or an enterprise.
Yeah, good point. All right, get ready to close out with the rollout and next steps. So we have the phases. All right, so effective date for this 48 CFR is November 10th. So that's the day where the rule goes into effect. So phase 1 is going to be level 1 and level 2 self-assessments. And then 12 months after phase 1, we have the phase 2 solicitation of required level 2 certification assessments. As we previously mentioned, those prime contractors are not likely going to wait on these phases. They're going to be wanting to see their subs already having level 2 certifications completed prior to this phase 2. Phase 3 is going to have level 3. And then by phase 4, the full implementation, where they see that all DoD solicitations and contracts will include CMMC level requirements as a condition of contract award. So, and then DoD may, they have the authority to implement these CMMC requirements in advance of the phase rollout. So you can't just rely on waiting on that phase rollout.
So does that mean that DoD could put it into a contract on November 10th for a CMMC certification? Because that's how I read it. I mean, that'd be kind of a, not nice.
I wouldn't be surprised to see that. Yeah, I would not be surprised at all. So just some quick next steps. Make sure you identify your data. It really starts with that. Oh, go ahead, Dan.
One thing to remember, let's say you get a 5-year contract and you think, hey, I'm golden. All I had to do was do a CMMC level 2 self-assessment. I don't have to worry about it for 5 years. Well, every year you have to go and self-assess. But if you get a modification or a new task added to that contract, guess what? They can put in the actual C3PAO assessment.
Yep. Task orders.
So don't think that if you get a contract in this first year, you're good for 5 years.
Yep, absolutely. So it's clear next steps, your data. What data are you handling? If you don't have FCR CUI, look at your contract. Does it say you have the requirement? Like Zach mentioned earlier, you have clients where they don't have FCR CUI. However, their contract requires that they at least have a system that could handle FCR CUI if they ever were to get it. So you need to know what that level is. And again, it'll be in the solicitations. I mean, most importantly, engage leadership. Make sure that leadership's on board and understand this is not just an IT problem. This is something that's going to require the entire organization to be on board, because there's requirements around physical security, human resources, or personnel security, and other requirements that's not specific to IT. And then just some key takeaways. We all can just chime in on this one. Anything I want to leave people with, some action items or tips as far as they're embarking on this compliance journey?
Gap analysis, very important, and scoping. Please, gap analysis.
Yeah, scoping huge.
Scoping, start with that so you can narrow it down, but do that gap analysis and make sure it's right. Make sure it makes sense to you, every single question. Just in case you're, there by yourself, you want to be able to talk to it. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. And I would say that's where your organization stands to probably save the most money is in the scoping phase, where they can identify how they can reduce that scope, because the smaller the scope, the smaller the compliance requirements and burden. But the larger the scope, you want your entire enterprise in scope, and it's going to be pretty expensive and burdensome on top of that.
Yeah. I mean, based on, I don't know, maybe a dozen assessments at this point, since we became a C3PAO, I'd say scope is so critical. And then trying to reduce your scope. We have had more than one company, like after they book an assessment with us, say, you know what, this is just too hard. Our scope's too big. We're going to go get an enclave and do this instead, which is a crazy time to make that decision, by the way, once you've already paid for an assessment. So really, really look hard at what you really need. Again, if you don't even have CUI, you really don't need to bring everything in scope, despite what some of the better funded MSPs and marketing organizations may say. So yeah, do that, reduce your scope. And then I would say from assessments, I was surprised to see massive publicly traded companies you've heard of, for example, not realizing that you can't put CUI in commercial Microsoft 365, which is crazy. Like 5 minutes of Googling could, or Binging, whatever, could have given me that answer. So don't assume that you're going to get this right just because you're a big company. We have another example of a really sharp, amazing OSC that has been through basically every other compliance regime under the sun, aside from CMMC. They did a mock assessment with us first, and they bombed it because they did not understand all the nuances of CMMC. So that's the other part. Again, not to try and spread fear, I really hate that, but I have seen that if you don't know what CMMC is and you don't understand these controls and objectives, it is going to be difficult to just come up with an answer for a complex system without someone that does understand what they're asking for. Because it's certainly not, there's not like the idiot's guide to NIST 171A. It should be like NIST should have that, or someone should make that like actual English translation of what they mean by whatever they say in there. But yeah, I would say that's some of the big stuff. And just don't fall for the fear. I mean, as of today, people are going to say you have to get certified tomorrow and you have to spend $250,000 to get ready. And I think it's extraordinarily unlikely that you're certainly not going to have it added to your existing contract for a long time. But I would truly be shocked if new contracts that small businesses are going for are going to have this requirement by the end of the year. Maybe so, but I'd be really surprised. I think there's still some time for it to all get settled. So
agreed. I think that's a good note to close out on. Thank you all for joining. Thanks for the presenters. I know y'all very busy for taking time to share your insights. So yeah, now it's showtime now. We gotta get to work. All right, everyone. Have a good day.